Hello, White Sox fans, and welcome to another edition of the FutureSox podcast, a special edition, if you will. My name is Ian Eskridge. Joining me this afternoon is James Fox. Also joining us in this special edition, we have MLB senior writer Jim Callis. Just go ahead and welcome him in. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing? It's been kind of a rough year, huh?
We can like do some positives like on this show at least. We have like a big league show like on our stream that two guys do, and that one's rough.
I was gonna say, I guess FutureSox is probably a happier place than PresentSox.
Yes, it is.
Oh. Yeah, sure. It's been really ugly. At least they're setting records, though.
I just keep coming back, and I think we talked about this when I was on. Was I on preseason or before?
Yeah.
Like when I pointed out, I don't like the lottery rules where the White Sox are credited with winning a lottery pick this year, even though they moved from 4th to 5th. That's not really winning, but they can't pick in the top 10. It just makes it harder. I get why the union wanted the rule. I get the feeling, why people don't like tanking. I don't think you guys, I don't think the White Sox are tanking. They did not intend to be this bad. It's just their window closed rather abruptly, and they're trying to rebuild, and it's just going to set the rebuild back. Instead of having as good of odds as anybody is having the number one pick next year, they're going to pick 10th. I think I'm getting off track already. I think they should do two things. One, I don't think it should be 1 year if you're a non-revenue sharing team and 2 years if you're a revenue sharing team that you get lottery picks, because the A's are in the same boat, and the A's move backward in 2 years. But I think they should maybe make it 2 and 3 instead of 1 and 2. But I think even more so, it should not count as winning a lottery pick if you move backwards. Right. Like, it's not like the White Sox moved from 4 to 1; they moved from 4 to 5, and now it's going to make it harder for bad teams to rebuild.
A lot harder. Like if it were the old rules and they had 31 wins, but they were guaranteed the number one pick, as a fan, I wouldn't even care right now. I'd be like, oh, that's fine. You're getting the number one pick. It's fine. But they're not. They're not. So it's
and it kills you not just from a talent standpoint, but you look at what the Guardians did this year, and the Guardians won a lottery pick, and they might win the division in the same year. But the Guardians, that first pick was worth $10.6 million, and counting rounds 11 through 20, they spent $20.4 million on the draft, which is a record. Next year, the number one pick is probably going to be worth $12 million in bonus pool money. And the White Sox not only are not going to pick at the top of the draft, they're not going to have that large of a bonus pool, so they can't even be aggressive with moving money around. So I think it's one of these things. A lot of times when they make draft rule changes, there are unintended consequences. And I mean, we can sit here and talk about A's ownership, and how cynical A's ownership has been, but I don't think the A's have purposely tried to tank. I think it's, they just aren't spending money, which I guess is tanking in a way. But I don't think John Fisher's with the A's saying, "Hey, let's tank." I think he's just being super cheap. But whatever. But like the A's, likewise, are going to be penalized. They're going to pick 11th this year after theoretically could have had the number one pick. Odds were that they had a shot at the number one pick the last 2 years, and their picks move backwards both times.
Yeah, and I mean, it happened to the Nationals this year, and I feel like it was like kind of an under talked about thing a little bit, just because. I don't know. Maybe it's because their core was closer to being ready, and they traded for the extra pick, so they actually made something out of it. I think they did okay, but
you're right. It's funny. You're right. Like the fact that they did the lottery and the Nationals won the number one pick. It's like, okay, we can't have that, because you're ineligible. So then the Guardians won it, and then they drew the number 2 pick, and it was the Nationals again. Like you're right. Like that just didn't really get talked about. Like I think. Also, probably because they weren't historically bad. But yeah, it's just crazy. The White Sox, I've lost track of how many games are on pace to lose now. It was 123.
5, yeah. I mean, it's
something, whatever, like a record. And they can't pick higher than 10th. That's just going to be a massive blow to the system. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the system, you just got done doing the midseason re-rank a few weeks back. What else are you working on?
Well, it's weird. So our schedule, from January through mid-August, we have one major project after another looming over us, in addition to like just normal stuff we're doing. Like it goes from the top 100 prospects list in the preseason to the top 30 prospect lists, which we are finishing as we're running around spring training. And then this year we threw spring breakout into the mix, and we were all broadcasting games and creating content for that. And then that got us a slower start on the draft, and the draft kind of ties us up for several months. And then you have the draft combine, and then the draft is at the same time at the futures game. And because everything's so late, like then we're scrambling to update all the lists after the draft. So right now, kind of taking it easy for a little bit. Like we'll have various things with call ups, although that's not what it used to be, because it's not like the old days where you could call, up everybody on the 40-man roster. But essentially, like the next big thing is probably the Arizona Fall League. And that's not even like the Arizona Fall League is easy. Like we put a lot of time into it, but it's super easy. And I really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite times of the year. So our next big project will be when we do the draft top 100, which will come out between like Thanksgiving and the winter meetings. But like it's actually now kind of like for 3 months, somewhat slow relative to the rest of the year, which is good.
So the White Sox have the 11th ranked system now on MLB Pipeline. Do you feel that it's mostly due to the pitching, due to the short, lesser amount of bats in the system? Do you think it's just because there are just so many really good pitching prospects?
Yeah, I mean, they do have some position prospects. I mean, I know we're going to talk about Colson Montgomery, and he hasn't had, the year that I think anybody, hoped he was going to have, but he's still young. But like, Edgar Quero has taken a step forward. George Wolkow is fascinating. I guess he's got tremendous power, and he's got a strikeout rate of 40%, but he should be coming off his high school senior year. And like, he's interesting. Brooks Baldwin has been a positive development. So there have been some, positive stories with the position players, but I do think the strength of the system, as you mentioned, is pitching. I mean, Noah Schultz you can make a case that Noah Schultz is the best pitching prospect in baseball. We don't quite have him that high, but you can make that argument. I think like even less debatable is that Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith are probably the two best left-handed pitching prospects in all of baseball. We're going to see Jairo Uriarte, who just got called up. They got him obviously in the Dylan Cease trade. They also got Drew Thorpe, who's graduated. I think the guy who doesn't get talked about a lot is Grant Taylor, because he was coming off Tommy John and he looked really, really good. And then he had a lat strain and they've kind of shut him down. And then even guys like, Kai Bush bounced back, Mason Adams, who I'll admit I did not know much about, 14 months ago. And it's like, oh, this guy's interesting. And now it's like, this guy's more than interesting. He's really, really good. So I do think that the pitching is the strength of the system. Like there's higher ceilings for a lot of the pitchers than there's some position player depth, but there's higher ceilings on the pitchers.
What was your reaction to the White Sox taking Hagen Smith at 5? Because I know, like, you and I talked a lot. Everybody I talked to thought they were taking a position player, myself included.
I did too.
And then you talked to us early. Like, I didn't mind the pick because I feel the most comfortable about them developing like a pitcher, just with their history of hitters. So I was cool with it. I was shocked that night. We were on a live stream, and I wasn't expecting it at all.
No, that was kind of my reaction too, because especially like I kept thinking it was gonna be Connor Griffin. Like we kept hearing Connor Griffin, and like it's interesting. Like the team obviously is having a horrible big league season. So on one hand, I thought, especially with who was on the table, Chase Burns, we kind of found out day of the draft, a couple hours later draft, hey, Chase Burns is going to go pretty good. He's probably going to go 2 or 3, which I didn't, like there was some thought that Chase Burns could maybe last 2. And while I knew they liked Hagen Smith, I just thought they were going to take Connor Griffin or Caglione Fell or J.J. Weatherholt. It was kind of like J.J. Weatherholt, if he doesn't go 1, is going to get to him. And I just thought they were going to go position player. And I think you can make a case for any of those guys. So I think it was fine with them taking Hagen Smith. I was just more surprised. Like if you took Connor Griffin, you were taking the player with the best tools in the draft, but who also came with risk, because there are analytic departments out there who, because of his swing path, they just do not think is going to play as hoped against big league pitching. So that would have been boom or bust. Like Connor Griffin's either going to be, I still have my shtick down. Connor Griffin, 30-30 potential, where he's a gold glove center fielder or a plus shortstop. Like, but he might not hit. So like that's a risk. You have Caglione, who, it's interesting because they really don't have position players. You could almost make you could make the argument either way, like you did, James. Like, hey, they do a much better job recently of developing pitching, but you could also say, boy, they need some hitters. So you could argue like, Caglione has the most raw power in the draft, and he's like, it's a weird profile because he chases a ton of pitches, but he doesn't swing and miss. And unlike some guys who chase a lot of pitches and maybe make suboptimal contact, he just hits the ball hard. Like he'll hit a ball 6 inches off the plate and crush it the other way for a home run. Weatherhold, I really thought it was going to be Weatherhold or Connor Griffin. Like Weatherhold his floor stands out because he's arguably the best hitter in the draft. There's really not that much difference between him and Travis Bazzana. I think you're talking about a guy who's a well above average hitter, average power, maybe a shortstop, probably more likely a second baseman. Better chance to play shortstop, I think, than Gonzalez, Jacob Gonzalez, first round pick the previous year. So he would be a guy who is floor and ceiling. But I get Hagen Smith. I mean, Hagen Smith to me, I thought he was the best pitcher in the draft. I liked him more than Chase Burns to wipe out slider. He doesn't throw as hard as Chase Burns, but he misses a lot more bats and it gets a lot less damage done against his fastball. It's not the prettiest delivery. It's not an orthodox delivery, and the control comes and goes a little bit, but it's wipeout stuff. And so, it's a long way of saying I agree with you, James. I was shocked that they didn't take a bat because I kept hearing bat, bat, bat. But Hagen Smith was a legitimate pick at 5. Yeah. Like, it wasn't like they reached to like, hey, we're going to push up a pitcher. Like, it wasn't like they took Durangelo Saintia, who went 15th. Like, hey, we got let's say Hagen Smith had gone. Like, we have to have a pitcher. They didn't reach for Hagen Smith. I just think all of us who do mock drafts and you guys who are very plugged into what the White Sox are doing, I think we all thought it was a hitter. Like, I obviously am not allowed to gamble on the draft, but figuratively speaking, if I was betting on the draft, I would have said, I felt like it was 90-95% the White Sox were taking a bat there.
For sure. And like we talk to people, Jim, but we don't talk to the general manager. And I think ultimately, I think there are a lot of people there that had a draft mapped out with like position players. But I think that like if Hagen Smith is like their best guy on the board, I don't know. I feel like if you're Chris Getz, it's really easy to just be like, well, we're taking the best guy, So,
yeah, and I don't know that Chris, I don't know the details. I don't know that Chris said to Mike Shirley, we're doing this, or, hey, we're staying with the board, or I don't know how that unfolded. I do think, I kind of felt like Mike Shirley, the scouting director, probably had less interference this year than he did.
Than ever, probably.
So like, I don't know exactly how that went down, but yeah, I think like, my best source for the draft, like he thought they were taking bats too, but he kept saying we do like Hagen Smith a lot. And my guess is that whenever they lined up the guys, Hagen Smith was above. Like again, I get the argument you can make. Like it's weird. Like I get where you could argue against Connor Griffin because of the bat. I guess I get where you can argue against Caglione because he chases and he is a first base only. And they took a can't miss first baseman in 2019. Andrew Vaughn hasn't lived up to expectations. And I'm not even criticizing him for the pick because everybody thought Andrew Vaughn was can't miss. And so I get that. Like I'm still, just based on what I knew at the time, surprised that they took, like I honestly thought that it was going to be, I had Griffin's slight edge over Weatherholt with that pick. And Weatherholt gave you floor and ceiling. But again, Hagen Smith might be the best pitcher in the draft. And like, you sit there and dream of a future rotation. Like, okay, is Garrett Crochet going to be there? Are they going to trade him? We don't know. Like, feels like we think they're probably going to trade him. But you still can look at a future rotation of Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith and Drew Thorpe and feel like it's a pretty good rotation. I mean, the best thing about the team this year, not that there have been that many silver linings, was, they traded Fetty, but I was reading something today that like just wins above replacement for Crochet and Fetty are like far and away better than any team that's lost like 110 games or more in Major League history. Like they actually had two pretty good starting pitchers and still have managed to be this bad.
Yeah.
So,
After the draft, like night one especially, Mike Shirley just like kind of talked a lot about like the jockeying for position with the top guys, and it's like something we always talk about with like whatever bonuses and like calling agents to try to push a guy down or whatever. Just like, what did you think overall, like the top of the draft class with like some of the bonuses that went out?
What's interesting, like, so Travis Bazzana went first and he got 8.95 million. And, there's some thought that maybe he could have gotten more if he went later and he wanted to be number one, Australia, and it's a big day for Australia baseball. Chase Burns got 9.25 million at 2. That was a little more than I thought he was going to get. But I think what worked for him is the same agency, Vayner Baseball, had Chase Burns and Charlie Condon. And I think if Chase Burns didn't go 2, then Charlie Condon was going 2 and Chase Burns was going 3. So you couldn't really, like, even if Chase Burns was going 2, you couldn't get a big discount with him. Like, I initially thought, and I was wrong, that Chase Burns might, and I thought Hagen Smith, one of those guys might go 7 or 8, could fall as far as that if all the position guys went. And it just didn't work out that way. I did think, the one thing I got right, I did think Charlie Condon was going to get 9.25 million. I thought he was going to get, he tied for the highest bonus in the draft, but I thought he was going to beat Paul Skeens. I thought he was going to get the highest bonus in the draft. And then, what I was going to say, the interesting thing about the draft was, and I do think it's true, teams always say they got the guy they wanted. I do think the first 4 teams got the guy who was on the top of their board. And that's why the bonuses were maybe higher than we thought. Like, I do think the Guardians had Bazzana on the top of their board. I do think the Reds had Burns ahead of Condon because it cost the same. If they liked Condon more than Burns, they would have taken Condon. I know the Rockies had Condon on top of their board. And then I got intel the night before, and I didn't quite believe it. Like, because there was some thought that if Bazzana doesn't go 1, he's going to go 4. And somebody with A's told me, who wasn't super high up, that he thought they would take Nick Kurtz over Bazzana. And I was like, really? And he's like, I'm pretty sure. And then I had somebody else who was higher up say, well, we're just assuming Bazzana's not going to be there. So I was like, okay, that's what it is. But Eric Kubota, their scouting director, came out publicly and said, we had Nick Kurtz as our number 1 guy coming into the year. And I'll admit, I had Nick Kurtz as my number 1 guy coming into the year. And he was number 1 on our draft board on, July 14th, whatever day the draft was. So I think it was an interesting draft. And that's one of the reasons that there wasn't as much saving up high, is that I think the first 4 teams got the guy on the top of their board. And the thing, there is some jockeying, and now that the bonuses keep going up, like the number 1 pick is going to be probably a $12 million value. They're close to 12 million next year. And, this year was 10.6, and like nobody's going to get 12 million next year. So it gives you money to play with. But the reason these guys continue to get high bonuses and get, like there wasn't really discount at 2, there wasn't a discount at 3. The reason these guys are getting these high bonuses is teams want the players they want. And that's always been true. Like the bonus pool system does keep bonuses in check in terms of there's a finite amount of money that you can spend on the draft. But like going back to, I remember we had before 2007 is when they first instituted the signing deadline. And I remember I wrote a story for Baseball America saying this is not, and they changed the compensation. So you got better compensation if you didn't sign a pick. Because it used to be, if you didn't sign like the number 5 pick, you would get a pick after the first round, after the supplemental first round. You didn't get the number 6 pick the next year. They changed it. And I wrote, and they put in a signing deadline, which was, I think, in August, maybe it was September, whatever it was. And I wrote a story and I said, this isn't going to change bonuses at all, because the agents just need a deadline. It doesn't matter if it's August 15th, July 15th, 3 days after the draft. The guys who have leverage are going to walk you right up against that deadline and use it against you. And I said, and my point I wrote in the story was, the bottom line is teams want talent. Teams don't want to wait a year to get the pick back. They're going to pay what it takes to get guys. And it was funny. Frank Coonelly, who at that point was kind of like the draft enforcer for MLB, called me and told me I was flat out wrong. He wasn't angry, but he's just like, hey, totally disagree. This is going to change things. And I just said, I really don't think so, because when it comes down to it, teams are going to want to sign the players. And I don't know if you guys remember that first summer. That was a crazy draft where none of the over slot guys signed. And that's back when the slots were not negotiated. MLB just said, these are the slots. It was informal, and they were below market value. And it was like a week before the deadline, and none of the big money guys had signed. And then the Tigers signed Rick Porcello to a record contract. He'd fallen to the end of the first round. And Casey Crosby and Cale Orge. I think I'm forgetting a guy. And then teams just went crazy, and everybody's waiting for somebody else to be the first one so they would get in trouble. And then everybody signed guys. And I was right. And so now, like, nobody's going to go over 5% of your bonus pool and lose first round picks, but teams are still going to spend money. And that's like, if it's going to cost you if the guy has enough leverage to say, I'm not going to sign for less than 9.25 million as the number 2 pick, and you really like that guy, you're going to pay him. Because the one thing that the players do have some leverage in that you want to know what the number is so you can figure out who else you can draft and pay over slot.
Right.
But yeah, so anyway, that was a very long-winded answer. But yeah, it made sense because of the demand for those guys and how much those teams like those guys, that teams weren't like every year. It seems like a lot of people say, hey, teams are going to be cutting deals left and right. And no, teams usually wind up taking the guys they want and getting them. Now, you might have a situation where the Marlins really like PJ Merlando and he wasn't going to go that high and their draft board blew up. So they're like, we're going to take PJ Merlando and we'll save money. Well, you could do that. But like the guys who are going high at the draft are going to get paid. We might have a $10 million player next year. I guess Ethan Holiday is a favorite. Ethan Holiday might be a $10 million player next year.
Is there anybody else in particular from the White Sox draft class that you liked?
Yeah, it was interesting. Like I'll admit, I was not the biggest Caleb Bonham fan. The guys I talked to had questions about his bat. Obviously, the White Sox do not, and they're really pleased with him. I think Blake Larson, their supplemental second-round pick, is interesting. He's a lefty who flew under the radar a little bit. I think Nick McLean and Casey Saki and Sam Antonacci are good college bats that they got. And they went about in the draft where they were supposed to go. But they're interesting. So, I do think, obviously, when you look how they split the money, the bulk of this draft was going to come down to how good Hagen Smith and how good Caleb Bonham are in the long run. And I think they got some nice, complementary players to go along with those guys.
You brought up Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz earlier. Do you have any thoughts on their timeline? I mean, obviously, with their pitching and how much pitching they brought up, there's not going to be a crazy push to get them up. But do you have any thoughts on what we can expect?
Yeah, I mean, I think for terms of being ready, like just in a vacuum, you don't look at like you're not looking at their age. You're just looking at how good they are. And you're not looking at like how bad the team might be. I think they're both conceivably going to be ready next year, by the end of the season. Now you get into, is it worth and I can never keep it so Noah Schultz was a 22 draft.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to go on the 40-man until after next season, right?
Right.
And Hagen Smith obviously doesn't for a couple more years. I think they're both going to be ready by the end of next season. But considering that I would think they're still going to be in a massive rebuilding phase, I don't know why you would tie up a spot on the 40-man roster. Unless you have a situation where Noah Schultz has been pretty amazing. Like he had a couple physical issues and they were very cautious with him the first year. But I mean, Noah Schultz, I'm just calling up his numbers. I mean, Noah Schultz has got a career 2 ERA. Minor league hitters hit 179 against him. He's got 142 to 29 strikeout to walk ratio in 108 innings as a high school pitcher. Noah Schultz might just crush AAA to the extent next year where you're like, well, we need to call him up because he has nothing, it's not doing him any good to be pitching in Charlotte. But yeah, I think the White Sox will be tempted to call those guys up maybe by the end of next year. And it may be more prudent just to make them wait until 2026. But I do think Noah Schultz especially might just force the issue by if he continues to pitch like this in AAA next year, I think he's going to get. I saw recently 95 innings this year. So let's say he pitches 125 innings next year. If he just blows away AAA through the first couple months of the season, maybe you call him up and you just shut him down early so he doesn't pitch too many innings. But he fascinates me because you just don't see. High school pitchers usually, especially guys that big, and he pitched 4 innings as a senior, as a high school senior because of mono. You just don't usually see guys do what he's done, and he's just made it look ridiculously easy.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that that Sox fans should be worried about the results that Colson Montgomery is putting up right now?
I'll equivocate here and say yes and no. Like, I still think he's one of the better prospects in baseball. I wouldn't. I mean, that's not a good year, especially considering the advantages hitters have in AAA, the advantages hitters have in Charlotte. I'm more concerned about the fact that he's moved very quickly. Project Birmingham aside, he's never really been that healthy. He never played 100 games in a season until this year, and he's played exactly 162 games at the AA and AAA level. Now, granted, he's been very young for those levels, but he's hitting like 210 at those levels with strikeout rate in the upper 20s. So I'm not like, he's 22 years old. Like, he's much younger than your typical AAA guy, and I think they've pushed him a little bit aggressively when you factor in the injuries. I mean, he was very good in single A. He was pretty good in high A. He was very good in high A for a brief stint last year when he after he had to start his 23 season delayed. But the fact that he struggled over a full season's worth of games in AA and AAA, again, I'll give him some credit for being super young. Like, I'm at the point where I try not to mention the Corey Seager comparisons, because Corey Seager just tore up the minors from start to finish. He never struggled like this. And I mean, again, with as bad as the team is, they don't need to force it. Like, it's funny because we all thought Colson Montgomery will be up this year. Like, I thought realistically he'd be up. I can't remember what the day was. I think it was like August 16th. I thought they'd bring him up with like 45 days left in the season so he'd keep his rookie eligibility and he could be a prospect incentive program, where they might get the extra draft pick for him. But yeah, I am concerned. Like, he just does not hit AA or AAA pitching. I think he's been moved quickly. He's dealt with injuries last year. If I'm running the White Sox, I would assume they would do this. Like, he's not making the team. I don't care how well he plays next spring. He's going AAA next year until he starts tearing up AAA. Like, and again, I mean, if he comes out next year and he adjusts to AAA, he's gonna be 23 years old and he hits 270 with 25 homers, or he's on that pace. When they call him up, that's fine. But like, I 100% would just be telling. Like, I would, say to Colson, like, this is what we want you to work on. Like, these are adjustments you need to make. And I don't care how good he looks in Glendale next year. I want him to go AAA to have success before I send him up to. I do not want him to come to the big leagues too quickly and struggle, and then we're wondering, like, what do we do now? He's going back to AAA until he starts tearing it up. And like, even we've got a month, because they play most of this month in AAA. I don't care if he hits 380 in September with 8 bombs. He's going back to AAA next year. And like, that also, I'll be cynical, has the added benefit. If I keep him down in AAA for at least 6 weeks, I'm pushing back his free agency a year. And if I keep him down long enough, he's not going to super to me, with arbitration. But I am concerned, but I'd say concerned. I'm not horribly worried, and I'm not like, oh man, but it's not a good year. And like, the deck is so stacked against pitchers in AAA, where you have pitchers adjusting to the Major League ball for the first time, which is difficult. The Major League ball is much less spinnable. Like, you can't manipulate the Major League ball like you can manipulate the ball that you use in AA and lower. Like, spin rates are lower, shape of pitches is different, induced vertical, all that stuff. That's a big change. The automated strike zone is a big change for pitchers, and Charlotte's a bandbox. So if anything, you should just be crushing it at Charlotte. So, I mean, how worried are you guys about Colson Montgomery?
Well, I mean, to me, like, a lot of it hinges on whether he can play shortstop or not, like, maybe he's not like the superstar that people were thinking, but I mean, if he's a 250 hitter that has 20 plus homers and he's playing shortstop, I mean, it's still, kind of a valuable big leaguer, so it just, I think a lot of it depends on that. If he has to move to third, like, I think that kind of changes the profile quite a bit.
Yeah. I feel like the ceiling, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said the ceiling is superstar. And now I kind of feel like the ceiling is all-star. Yeah. Like, I think he's still be a good player, but like, I need to see him get going in AAA.
Yeah. So, one guy that's kind of bounced back and forth, over promoted with the Angels a little bit, now with the White Sox having a good year, Edgar Quero, just how do you project him? And then I guess just like, what do you contribute to like the improvement that he's made this year?
I think the White Sox, like you hit the nail on the head, James. I think the White Sox let him catch his breath. Honestly, like I don't understand why the Angels have to rush every project they have. I mean, this guy was MVP of the Cal League in 2022 as a legit 19-year-old. He turned 19 in April, 19 all season, and like really promising offensive catcher. So I'm the Angels. What am I going to do? Let's skip him a level to Double A at age 20, and he struggled, and he played a little bit better with Birmingham. And then I think like kind of like what we were just talking about with Colson Montgomery. I think the White Sox did a smart thing. Instead of saying, well, he spent the whole year in Double A, let's send him to Triple A. They're like, no, go to Double A. He went back to Double A and he started hitting with a lot more power, hit for solid average. And he's in Triple A, and we're seeing, I mean, he's doing what guys do when they get to Charlotte. He's hitting, I'm looking at he's, over 300, or he's over 300, 400, 500 in the slash stats. And I just think the simplest thing with him was letting him catch his breath after he skipped a level for no reason. And it's hard, like, with good prospects, it's hard to send them back. Like the inclination might have been like, man, he's struggling in Double A with the Angels, and we just traded for him. But it's like these guys, and I don't know, like why. I mean, I know why, but like it's almost like it's jarring to the prospect. If you'd sent Edgar Quero back to High A at the time of the trade and say, hey, just get going. Like sometimes that messes guys up. So like teams are reluctant with their best prospects to send them backwards. So it's like they were kind of stuck. But I give them credit. I give the White Sox credit. They kept him in Double A. He basically has looked exactly like the guy he looked like in 2022. I mean, that's an awful trade for the Angels, which had the potential to be awful at the time. They sold low on Quero, like panicking, trying to make a, I guess, long shot run at the playoffs so they could try to keep Shohei Ohtani. But, I think Edgar Quero, it's funny. I think the biggest question on him, like, he hit for average at Birmingham. He didn't hit for much power. And I think the question coming into the year was, okay, you knew he was going to hit. How much power is there going to be? And because he really struggled last year to launch balls in the air. And he's doing a better job of it. So now I think you're looking at a guy you feel is going to hit for average. He could have 20 homer power. I think he's always going to be, like a fringy, maybe average catcher. Like I think he can get by. I don't think he's ever going to be anything special behind the plate, but I think he's not. I guess still picking on this guy years later. He's not Zach Collins, where you're like, oh man, can this guy catch? He can catch. He's just going to probably be like a 45 or 50 catcher with a 50-ish arm, but he's going to be a really good offensive player. And so I think that's one of the best moves they've made in the last couple of years. It was stealing Quero from the Angels. And, like you asked, I really think it was just letting him catch his breath, and hopefully we'll see the same thing with Colson Montgomery next year.
Yeah, I mean, even like Kai Busch is like maybe a number 5 starter. Like that trade was ridiculous. Like it just like doesn't make any sense. But
it was weird. It was like both those guys were struggling in Double A. I think Kai Busch had a lat strain. He wasn't pitching well, and his stuff had really backed up. And that's just one where I think you caught a team that was desperate. Like, hey, we're going to make this. We're going to try to like make the only way we keep Shohei is if we make the playoffs. And in retrospect, I don't think they would have kept Shohei even if they won the World Series. No. I think Shohei always wanted to be a Dodger. The only reason he wasn't a Dodger was they didn't have the DH in the National League when he came over. I think if they had the DH in that, like I've had a bunch of people tell me that if they had the universal DH, I think he would have been Dodger from day one. But anyway, I just think of the Angels like, oh, let's go get Giolito and Lopez, and we'll make the playoffs, and Shohei will want to stay because we'll see our commitment to winning. And like, these two guys are struggling, we'll just give them up. Like. It was a bad process on the Angels' part.
So one of the guys you mentioned earlier, Grant Taylor, I think he's probably the highest upside starting pitcher in the system outside of the two lefties at the top, obviously. Our interpretation is that he's going to pitch in the Arizona Fall League.
That would be awesome. I would love that. It makes sense.
He's throwing currently in like that bridge league. It's obviously not announced yet. We're under the impression that that's the plan. How much could something like what could something like that do for, I guess, like just his prospect, like pedigree? You mentioned him, obviously, right? He's probably ranked similarly everywhere, but I mean, it seems like a guy that could really take off with more eyes on him.
Yeah, it's funny because so he was at LSU. I mean, it's amazing. LSU won the national championship, and Grant Taylor had Tommy John surgery before his season started and never threw a pitch for him. And they also, it's amazing. I remember talking to Jay Johnson about this. One of the guys they lost in their recruiting class was Jacob Mizorowski, who has about as nasty stuff as anybody in the minor leagues. So their rotation could have been Paul Skeens on Friday, Jacob Mizorowski on Saturday, Grant Taylor on Sunday. Like that staff never would have given up a run. And even though they didn't get two of those guys, they still won the national title. Now you will have people claim, and it's totally overblown, that Grant Taylor looked better than Paul Skeens in fall practice. That is 100% false. Paul Skeens looked so good. The guys were telling me he was the best pitching prospect they'd ever seen. They're like, it's fall practice. I'm not going to go crazy, but he's ridiculous. Like Paul Skeens is crazy. Now, Grant Taylor looked really, really good. Grant Taylor had pitched very well in the Cape, and he looked good in the fall. But you will see people have written that he looked even better than Paul Skeens. Don't buy that. You're talking about a guy who can like run his fastball up to 99 miles an hour. It's a lot of 93, 97 with some late hop when it's on. He added a cutter in that fall, in the fall of 22, in the low 90s. He has feel to spin both a curveball and a slider that both have power to him. He doesn't really throw a changeup. I don't know like how many he's thrown this year, but he threw 4 changeups in 52 innings in 2022 when he's pitching mostly relief. But like it just comes down to like this, and the stuff looked really good when he came back this year. He had I think it was a lat strain. I think he came back in May. He pitched well for a month. He had a lat strain, and I think the White Sox just figured, look, he can't come back from not pitching any innings in 23. We're not going to overload him in 24. Let's just be cautious. But yeah, I mean, he had a 32-2 strikeout to walk ratio in his 19 innings when he pitched. And I know from talking to the White Sox, they were very excited. Like the stuff it was exactly what people had seen in the fall at LSU before he got hurt. And it's funny, like I think everybody's ranking him. And I think, obviously if White Sox fans are looking at lists, like we've got him at number 6. I think he's pretty high on most lists. But I also don't think White Sox fans realize how good this guy can be. Like he might be, I wouldn't even say behind Schultz and Hagen Smith. I mean, they're left-handed, but his stuff could be right there with him. He's not a 6'9" lefty with a low slot, which makes Noah Schultz even tougher, and all that. But like, if he's healthy, like I guess if we're projecting out the rotation, he'd be the number 3 starter on stuff. But like it's frontline starter stuff. Like that could wind up being a really, really good pick. I mean, I guess, it never works out like you think it's going to work out. But let's assume they trade Crochet this offseason. I mean, their rotation in a couple of years could be Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, Grant Taylor, Drew Thorpe, Jonathan Cannon. That's a pretty good rotation. Now, granted, it's pitchers. They don't, they'll break your heart. But, like, it's pretty exciting.
So you guys have George Woolco very high up on your list, just like we do. We were kind of the outliers, as well with how high we were going to project him. What went into your guys' decision to put him up that high? Yeah,
it's interesting. So, like our process is not as elaborate during the season as in the off season. Like I'll make a bunch of calls. I make fewer calls and more text during the season because everything's fluid and we have other stuff going on. But I kept hearing from people, both inside and outside the organization, on both Taylor and Woolcow, you should rank those guys higher. Like I had Brooks Baldwin a little bit higher initially, and he's going to graduate off our list, I think this weekend. And I just had like Woolcow is like it's extreme. Like the raw power, I think it's the best raw power in the system. I mean, you could project that he might have future 80 raw power on the 28 scale. I mean, he's 6'7", 240, left-handed, strong, bat speed. Obviously, there's a lot of leverage. He could crush the ball. Like it might be 80 raw power. But the question is, how much is he going to hit? Because he's got a strikeout rate of around 40%. And I'll cut him some slack because he should be coming off his high school senior season. He obviously reclassified, entered the draft year early. But, like, it's a concerning amount. Like, you can kind of glass half full him or glass half empty him based on how you want. I mean, he's 18 all year. Like, it's a legit 18. Turned 18 in January. And, he tore up rookie ball. They promoted him. He's played 70 games in single A. And he's got 11 homers as an 18-year-old. My guess is he's got to be about the youngest guy in that league. but he also has 120 strikeouts in 71 games. I mean, he is drawing walks. So, I mean, there is some patience there. I just think he's probably going to have to tone down the approach a little bit. But I had guys, I kept having guys tell me, like, I had him a little bit lower first, and guys were like, I'd go for the ceiling. I had guys say, rank him based on his ceiling. He's still so young. And, if the strikeouts don't come down, he'll probably move down the list, in future years. But, I mean, to hold his own like he has as an 18-year-old who should be coming out of high school ball has been pretty impressive. I assume that was kind of your guys' thinking as well.
Yeah, I think so. So, Ian, I think, is going to ask you about Mason Adams here in a second. But I mean, just the discussions that we've had is like, if I'm going to have like a big say in the process, like at FutureSox, like I'm always going to lean ceiling.
I do too.
And I just kind of like, after looking at the list, it's like, are we really going to rank like Jacob Gonzalez or Brian Ramos like ahead of this kid that's like, and like the 40% strikeout rate isn't lost on me. Like I know.
Yeah,
like, when people are kind of like, oh, like they just throw his stats at me. It's like that ignores how much he struggled, like, the first 2 weeks there and what he did after that.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like he should have been at Downers North High School, like, like up until like May of this year.
Yeah, he probably would have like barely played this year. Just because that's just what happened. Like I don't think Caleb Bonnemer is going to get in the game, right? I don't think they're going to throw him into single A. And like now that the Arizona Complex League season ends early, like he's probably playing in the Bridge League. We're going to have this Bridge League. Why don't we have stats on the Bridge League so we can see how guys are doing? But that's another question. But yeah, no, I agree. And like the thing is, like part of it too is when you like, I lean towards ceiling, like even factoring in floor. Like, are you going to take Jacob, like you said, Jacob Gonzalez or Brian Ramos over him? Or like you could argue, I mean, it's a pure floor versus ceiling argument. But hey, Brooks Baldwin is like torn it up and he's versatile and he's playing in the big leagues, yada, yada, yada. But Brooks Baldwin is also 6 years older than George Wolkow. Like, so like what's George Wolkow going to look in 6 years? And like, I don't do my whole list like just it's all ceiling. But like the top of the list, I'm generally going to lean to, okay, who are the guys who have the chance to be stars and above average big leaguers? And I really think that once you get past Wolkow, who's 7th on our list, like, and then you're like, and I have a lot of respect for Brooks Baldwin. Brooks Baldwin's more going to be that good type of glue player. I don't think Brooks Baldwin's going to be like an all-star or a multi-all-star. I think Mason Adams, I know we're going to talk about in a minute, is underrated, and he's done a great job. He might be in that future rotation. But like Mason Adams is more of a good number 4. Maybe he's a 3. Like he's not going to be like George Wolkow could be like I'm not saying I don't know what the percentage is. George Wolkow could be a 40 home run guy. Like he could be a difference maker, or I guess the parlance everybody likes to use these days is aircraft carrier, which is fitting because of how big George is. Like George Wolkow could be an aircraft carrier. When you get past him on our list, like at 7, like unless it's a guy who winds up being a lot better than most people think he's going to be, you don't have other guys you're like, oh, that guy could be like carrying a team, or that guy could be a difference maker, on the next White Sox playoff team.
Yeah, just watching the growth this year and the change in his approach that he made a couple of weeks into his stint in Kannapolis, and talking to him, very mature. I mean, he just
super mature.
Yeah, he looks like obviously he has the look of being, just a massive power hitter, but the mental thing doesn't seem lost on him. So
no, like you said, making adjustments. I mean, that's basically what you're looking for the first year is guys being able to make adjustments, and he has. I mean, I'd like to know. I haven't done the research. How many 18-year-olds have reached double-digit homers in full season ball, like in the last 20 or 30 years? Can't be many.
Yeah, can't be. Yeah. So yeah, moving on to Mason Adams. He's climbed up your list. He's climbed up our list as well. I was an early adopter. I'll take that one. What do you think about him? As a prospect in general, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he's kind of been overlooked because he was like a 13th round pick out of Jacksonville. He was senior sign. He was eligible for 4 straight drafts. Didn't get picked. Finally got picked as a senior. And I think he gets overlooked because his fastball, like it wasn't big draft pedigree. His fastball kind of sits in the low 90s. His fringy sinker. He's got a 2-seamer and a 4-seamer. His sinker is better than his 4-seamer, which sinkers aren't the in vogue pitch, but the two things he does really, really well. Well, three things. One, he spins the ball about as well as anybody in the White Sox organization. He's got the best curveball. He's got really good feel for spin. It's a legit plus curveball. Two, he throws a ton of strikes. So he's one that you could argue he might be the best strike thrower in the system. And it's harder to throw strikes and miss bats and not walk guys when you're throwing in the low 90s. It's what like if Noah Schultz is like throwing strikes, and I'm not detracting from Noah's control, but like Noah's got this wipeout slider that's coming from first base, and he's got really good life on the fastball. Like Noah Schultz has weapons, so Noah Schultz could come at you. Like Mason Adams falls behind the count, and his fastball's coming. That could be problematic, but like he throws quality strikes with a below average fastball or a fringy fastball. And then three, I think he's got some of the best mound presence in the organization. I think he mixes pitches well. Like the curveball is his best pitch. Everybody knows that, and he still gets you out with it. He still sets you up for it and gets you with the curveball. He's not afraid of hitters. He challenges them without getting hit. And with guys like that, to me, the test always is like, especially in single A, but even so in high A, if you could throw like a secondary pitch for strikes and you have good control, you're going to do well. Well, it's like, okay, let's see how you do when you get to Double A. And he pitched really well in Double A. He's pitched a couple times in Triple A, and he's been, it's 6 innings, so you can't read too much in that. But he had no problem with Double A. And so, I think he's more of a floor than a ceiling guy. But like, I think he's a guy who's a pretty good bet to be a 4 or 5 starter. I'll be curious to see how he does at AAA, because like we talked earlier, the deck is really stacked against pitchers in AAA. And he has one real weapon, and that's his curveball. But he compensates by mixing pitches and locations, and has the ability to do that. And he competes, and he doesn't give in to hitters. And so like he was interesting when I found out about him last year. I was like, okay, well, put him on the back third of the list, but he just keeps pitching well. And like, I like him personally. I might be in the minority, and this is not knocking. I like him more than I like Kai Busch. I would take him over Kai Busch. I mean, I put him ahead of Kai Busch on our list, and Kai Busch is fine. But I think Mason Adams is probably the best pitching prospect in the organization that fans don't know that much about.
Yeah. As far as as far as his AAA starts have gone, his first one, apparently his back was bothering him before the start even happened, before he got on the mound, and he tried to push through it. And if you look at the mound, I think it was Nashville that they were at, like the pitchers, no, maybe it was Louisville, but the pitcher's mound was like pretty much flat and didn't help him out at all. But he pitched 3 innings the other day and gave up 3 hits, shut out, and had a real nice outing. So I think things should probably go quite all right for him in AAA regardless. So what do you like about the 3 guys that the White Sox got back in Haral Perez, Albertus, and then William Bergoya?
Yeah, I mean, they're all interesting. I mean, I think they're all probably more second basemen than shortstops. I mean, they're all middle infielders, but they're all young. I mean, they're all 19 years old, and they can all hit. I mean, I think Perez has some of the. I do our Dodgers list, so I was familiar with both Perez and Albertus. And Perez, I think, has some of the best batted ball data and some of the best metrics for 19-year-old hitter in A-ball this year. So I think you're looking at a potential offensive second baseman. I think he's going to hit. I think he could be 50s across the board. Albertus is also 19, another international signing by the Dodgers, came out of Aruba, wasn't a big money guy, but he probably has a little bit better bat and a little bit less power than Perez. He's got a little bit stronger arm. But they're both guys who can hit. And then Bergola is interesting. I just think the question with him is he going to get stronger? Like, he can really hit. Like, he intrigues me. He runs better than those guys, but he's got less power. Like, he's listed at 5'9", 165. He's a career 295 hitter, but 354 slugger. Again, he's young, but I think all three of those guys are offensive-minded middle infielders, and they're good bat-to-ball guys. So, you hope. I think the key with those guys is going to be get them stronger. You'd like to enhance them defensively, so maybe they could, one of them, could stick it short or third. Like, Bergola, like Albertus has got the best arm of them, so he might be the best suited to playing on the left side of the diamond. Bergola is probably the quickest of them. Like, I'm sure that, and because they're all 19, you can't have them all playing second base on the same team. Bergola is a level ahead of those guys right now, but I think you'll see those guys play multiple positions, and we'll see. But they're offensive-minded infielders, middle infielders, and I wound up ranking them all kind of like right in the middle of the pack of the system.
Yeah, having William and Riku Nishida at the top of the lineup for the Dash is given other teams fits. It's pretty funny watching 2 5'6" guys come up and hit in a row, and they're both super fast and slap hitters and just causing all sorts of problems.
Yep.
So, Jim, I think in a perfect world, like the White Sox would trade Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert this offseason. I don't know that they're going to be able to trade Robert because I just don't know that they're going to get what they need. I guess just my question for you, like if you were doing, like what would you need to like move those two guys? And obviously the control's different on both of them.
Yeah, I mean, with Robert, I do think there's a lot of intrigue with Robert, but just he's been hurt and it hasn't been a good year. And you run the risk. I would not sell low on him. Like for me, I would want like Crochet is going to be like worth his weight in gold. Like with Crochet, I'd probably want, like, talking generically, they don't have to be on the list, but like 2 top 100 type prospects, and then a third and potential fourth prospect in the deal too. And like, honestly, I would hold fast on Robert. Like if like Crochet, I think you could argue they probably should trade him because I don't think there's like if he gets hurt, like he's a pitcher. If he gets hurt, the value disappears. And like, as much as I like Garrett Crochet, you do have pitching in the system. Like, again, I wouldn't trade him for the sake of trading him, but I would want to, like, I'll just play, like, the Orioles have depth. Like, I'd go to the Orioles and I'd be like, okay, I want Samuel Basayo or Kobe Mayo. Or, like, maybe I'd try for both, but you got to give me one of them, and you give me one of Kalzer or Hurstad. Or maybe I say, I want this guy from each pair, and then give me a couple more guys. Like, that's the type of trade I would want to make. And I'd be honest, like for Robert too, like I wouldn't just trade him for the sake of trading him. So I would kind of look at it like I would want, like, Crochet, you run the risk. And like the thing is, I think somebody will trade for Crochet because there is never enough pitching. But like they have 3 years or 4 years of control of him.
For Crochet?
3?
For who, Crochet?
Yeah.
No, it's only 2 more.
Okay, only 2 more. Yeah. Okay,
so I think they're definitely trading Crochet. I
think they are too, but I'll just throw out there, you don't have to trade him because it's not like you have less than a year. And obviously Robert, you can control him through 27 if you pick up the options. Look, if you're like, you have to listen. I would be aggressive about seeking trades for both, but I would want it to be. Like using this example isn't going to make White Sox fans feel good because it didn't pan out. But like when they traded Chris Sale, and obviously Chris Sale has more value than Crochet, but when they traded Chris Sale, they got Yohan Moncada and Michael Kopech, who are 2 of the best prospects in baseball. And you aren't going to get guys ranked that universally high, but like I would want a couple top 100 prospects and then a couple other guys who are interesting in the deal. I think that's what you have to shoot for. If you get to where you're trading Crochet for the sake of trading him, and you get like, and again, I didn't mind the Drew Thorpe trade, but if you're trading him for a guy who's on the back half of the top 100, and then 2 other guys, like, is that like really advancing you forward as an organization? I don't think so.
No, they got to get a ton, and I think that the issue is that they're trying to prioritize position players, and nobody wants to trade position players. So
but everybody wants pitching, and like again,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the Orioles are a team that makes a lot of sense, and I'll tell you, the other team, it would be riskier, but the Dodgers have a ton of teenage position prospects, like a ton, and like who are better than the guys the White Sox got, like in that trade. They have. I'm not saying you get all of them. They have Jose DePaula and Emil Morales and Eduardo Quintero and Kellen Lindsay and Zaire Hope and Kendall George and Ching Sin Ko. I just rattled off 7 guys, and I'm not saying I would trade Crochet for 4 teenage dudes, but like I feel like you could match up with the dot. Like again, I don't know if the Dodgers would do this, but the Dodgers keep getting pitchers hurt. Like, what if you could get Jackson Ferris and 2 or 3 of those teenagers and another pitcher for Crochet? Think about it.
Yeah, and there were deadline talks with the Dodgers where like, the rumors were like Jose DePaula and like River Ryan as guys coming back, and they didn't make a trade obviously, but I would imagine that's part of the offseason focus for sure. So, it's a historically awful season. You talked to us about it on the way in. Just like going forward though, like could you argue that they're in a better spot than they were maybe at this time a year ago? I mean, it's a better farm system. They have money.
Crochet's coming. Crochet's more merged. Yeah.
In theory, they have money to spend. So yeah, I mean, like it's awful, but I think they've set themselves up not well, but better than I think I thought maybe like a year ago or so.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair way to put it. Like I do. The concern is when you have a team that is this bad. Like the way I don't like prospects as much as anybody, and you guys love prospects too. Like you can't bank on it. Like I was like, oh, this could be the rotation. Like pitchers are going to get hurt, position players aren't going to pan out. But if you compare it to a year ago, Noah Schultz is one of the best pitching prospects in baseball now. They've added Hagen Smith. Edgar Quero has made a huge leap forward. Grant Taylor looks really intriguing. George Wolkow looks really intriguing. Like I said, Brooks Baldwin's going to graduate, but Brooks Baldwin's kind of come out of nowhere and become like an interesting guy. So yeah, I think you can say that. Like the problem is you have so many holes to fill that it's going to take time. But yeah, I do think you can definitely make the point that they're better off, not at the major league level, but like if you're looking at their future, you could feel better about their future now than you did a year ago.
Because I mean, the system even before last year's deadline trades, Jim, you guys had bottom 5. I mean,
it was, yeah. I thought like the trades and the draft last year, and they went from, I want to say they were in the bottom 5 and they went to like 18th on the list.
Yeah.
And this year they jumped from 18 to 11. And what's funny is they'll probably, my guess is they'll rank in the top 10 when we do the rankings again next spring, because they're not really graduating anybody off this list. Like Brooks Baldwin's going to graduate, but like if they're top prospects, they're not losing, like Colson Montgomery. Like, well, there was some thought maybe Colson Montgomery would come up at midseason, but like they're not going to lose guys off their list like other teams are.
Thank you so much for your time, Jim. We appreciate it. Every time you come on, we appreciate your insight. Do you want to let people know?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's always fun talking to you guys and you ask good questions, so it's a lot of fun for me too.
Thanks. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you and your work?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, all our stuff's at MLBpipeline.com, which is part of MLB.com. We've got stories, we've got scouting reports, we have top 30s for every organization, we have videos, we have tools grades, and I always tell people I do think one of the great things about our site is obviously where we work for MLB. MLB is trying to promote the game. It's all free. Nothing's behind a paywall. We're not. I mean, we make money off the site through advertising, but we're not just a standalone site that has to generate revenue. So all the stuff's free. And then I usually try to tweet about what I'm doing and what we're doing at MLB Pipeline at Jim Callis MLB. But yeah, like I said, it's kind of nice to be able to say like we don't have a major project going on right now. And sometime in September we'll probably do top 20 college players, top 20 high school players, as an early preview for next year's draft. And I can't remember. It seems like it changes every year when we'll get Arizona Fall League rosters out. But like feels like it should be.
Yeah, it seems like it should have already happened, honestly. But
yeah, like, but then I was looking last year. I think they kind of came out in mid-September.
okay.
So I don't like, even though the season starts October 7th, I believe. It's a little bit later this year, calendar-wise in October. But I assume. But anyway, at some point in the next few weeks, we'll have some early draft prospect lists, and we'll have some Arizona Fall League lists. And I'm excited about Grant. I mean, Grant Taylor will probably be one of the best arms, if not the best arm in the Fall League. Okay, because you have to. Teams just don't send pitchers there. If you stay healthy all year, you don't go because you reach your innings limit. Like we won't see Noah Schultz there, which would be great if we did. And then we don't see, if you are hurt, you kind of have to thread the needle. It has to be an injury that's not too serious. But it caused you to miss innings that we want you to get more, but it's not so serious that we aren't going to be super cautious with you.
Yeah.
I would love to see Grant Taylor in the Fall League.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was fun.